Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you and to celebrate what's been a rather amazing 30 years. We have the good fortune of having almost all of the directors of ISP here today, and I'll leave it as an exercise for people to think about how it is that having such a large number of directors may have contributed to the good results of the program. On average, I think each of us has served probably a little over 3 years because we had some co-director periods as well. So the 30 years with 10 directors is probably about 4 or 5 years. But it's magically worked. What we're going to do is we're going to proceed more or less in order of when people were directors. And each of us is going to say a few words for 5 minutes or so. And then we'll have some broader discussion and be happy to respond to questions. Since I got the mic in my hand, I'll simply start and then we'll turn things over to Rich. 30 years ago, I really had two primary goals when I decided to help create the Intelligent Systems program. The first was already talked about earlier today in the video in particular, that we hope to make PIT more attractive to graduate students who could work with formalisms. I was developing intelligent systems to help people learn complicated jobs, and I found myself struggling to recruit enough doctoral students who could handle, who were in psychology or education, but could handle a little bit of mathematics and computer science. They were great. I had great students, but they just didn't have the right skill mix, and it was very hard to recruit them. And that was a main driver in thinking about starting the Intelligent Systems program. Similarly, people working in intelligent medical diagnosis and other applications of cognitive science and artificial intelligence were also motivated to try and make the university an attractive place for the kinds of students who could really make an interdisciplinary program in intelligent systems work. I had a second goal, which I think I've been even more successful at, and that was to shape a program that was good enough that I would regularly doubt whether I belonged in it anymore. And I think that goal has been well satisfied, and in that sense, I've been quite happy with how things have worked out. There is in the last newsletter for ISP a bit of discussion of the program's beginnings, and there are copies of that at the registration desk if you haven't seen it already. So please feel free to pick one up. I'm going to instead really focus on a few lessons that you might want to take with you if wherever you're currently located or end up in the future, you decide to try to build an interdisciplinary program. So here's the lessons. The most important lesson is listen to wise people. ISP would not have existed had I not listened to Tom Detry, from whom I learned a lot about how to make things happen in what was, especially 30 years ago, a very conservative institution. And Tom was also visionary in seeing 30 years ago that medicine would benefit from strong research on intelligent systems. Alan Newell helped me see that growing the program solely from seed was risky. My original thought was find a bunch of assistant professors, see which ones survive, and we'll have a program eventually. And Alan convinced me that it was really important to hire a senior person like Bruce Buchanan to help get the system going. John Seeley Brown helped in both in equipping early cognitive science research at Pitt and in getting us on the radar of researchers elsewhere, especially in the learning and cognitive science area. And Bruce Buchanan himself convinced me and the rest of us that it was very important, even though we didn't all see ourselves as computer scientists, that it was very important to have the early stages of the Intelligent Systems program, graduate programming, articulate with computer science. And so he put a lot of work in making sure that people could float back and forth between computer science and ISP in their first years at Pitt, so that they didn't have to make a commitment up front at a time when everybody wondered whether people from ISP would graduate and be able to get jobs. So all those people helped. The second lesson that I think is important for you to take away, in addition to listening to smart people is be prepared for the inertia of academic entities. Sometimes it's just a matter of pushing against a risk-averse culture, and sometimes it requires a sense of humor. For example, we decided at the beginning that ISP students ought to learn a programming language suitable for writing intelligent systems. At the time, that happened to be Lisp. And so with a little bit of a nudge from the provost, the computer science department agreed to assign a teaching fellow to teach Lisp. We discovered, though, that this did not mean that they would assign someone who knew how to program in Lisp. So I went to see the then chair and said, you know, it would be good if we had someone assigned that knew how to that knew the content that they were supposed to be teaching. And I was informed that scheduling is a very difficult problem, and in fact it's NP complete, and that therefore there was no guarantee that such an arrangement was possible. We eventually made it happen. But basically that taught me the third lesson that I think is important in building any entrepreneurial enterprise, and certainly an interdisciplinary program in a university. Perfect is the enemy of done, I think, is the way it's said in one of the companies that has a presence here. One of the continuing challenges of the intelligent systems world really is deciding when and when not to accept the principle that sometimes good enough is good enough. Finally, I note that cognitive science and AI at Pitt got help from a lot of people elsewhere. When Jack Myers and Harry Popel were working on the intelligent medical diagnosis a bit before ISP started, they didn't have any computer powerful enough to do what they were doing, so Joshua Lederberg at Stanford gave them and later me access to the SumXAIM computer that was out there. Alan Newell then gave us ARPANET accounts because Pitt was at that time not connected to the network, so that we could access the machine out at Stanford, and we then got a high-speed phone line from Pitt to CMU, which was Pitt's only connection to the internet for several years. CMU, in fact, eventually assigned the domain name of pitt.edu to us, mainly so we wouldn't embarrass them, even though we had accounts in their system. And that was later passed on to the university, and that's how it turns out that I do have the oldest email address at the University of Pittsburgh. So ISP's godparents then were a molecular biologist, a psychiatrist, a computer and cognitive scientist, and whatever John Seeley Brown currently thinks his identity might be. And the parents were my great colleague Rich Thomason, the philosopher-linguist, and a psychologist. In spite of all of that, it worked, and I think all of us can be quite happy with how the program has evolved over time. And with that, let me turn things over to Rich for some comment.